The 19th century scramble for Africa resulted in a patchwork of European colonies across the continent. But by the mid-20th century, that patchwork was coming undone as independence movements in those colonies came to prominence and power. While each of these regions and countries have their own moments of glory and defeat, the story of Congo often seems like one of never-ending tragedy, exacerbated not only by colonial rule, but also the superpower rivalry after independence. I'm your host David, and this week we are going to look at Congolese independence and the subsequent Congo Crisis, the first major sub-Saharan conflict of the post-war period. This is the Cold War. Have you ever thought about building a website, either for your business, your personal brand, or even just for fun? Well, of course you have. That's why you need to check out Squarespace, the sponsor of today's video. Squarespace gives you a powerful online platform letting you create your own website for seamless engagement with both customers and followers. Squarespace lets you connect with your audience and generate revenue through gated, members-only content. Manage your members, leverage audience insights, and send email communications all through one easy-to-use platform. Build your community through your Squarespace website. It supports threaded comments, replies, and likes, and lets you use Squarespace's powerful blogging tools to schedule and share posts. Squarespace even lets you display feedback from your social media profiles directly to your website. If you've been thinking about creating a website, then go to squarespace.com/thecoldwar to start your free trial and get 10% off your first purchase. The Congo Free State was established as a personal holding of the King of Belgium in 1885, and over the following decades, the people of Congo were subject to unimaginable brutality as they were forced to participate in an extraction economy. By 1908, international pressure to halt the brutality had grown to the point that the Belgian government was forced to take over control of the territory, renamed the Belgian Congo. Over the following decades, economic development in Belgian Congo grew, with rubber cultivation being augmented and then largely replaced by the expanded development of extensive mining operations across the country. This was enabled by the construction of port facilities and railway networks across the vast colony. Now, although the economy grew tremendously, it was largely to the benefit of the European colonizers and their economic interests. The Congolese population, itself made up of many different ethnic groups, was largely used as labor, with the colonial authorities little concerned with their well-being beyond the proselytization of Christianity. Despite this, however, urbanization began to rapidly expand, education levels of the Congolese increased dramatically, and by the 1950s, a small but growing Congolese middle class was emerging. With that middle class came a growing sense of nationalism and a desire for independence. But like in so many colonies, the independence movement was not a unified one. There were numerous political parties who, although they all sought the same goal, were divided along both ethnic and ideological lines, with many differing ideas on how best to remove the Belgian authorities from Congo. The strongest of these parties was the Congolese National Movement, the CNM, and was represented by such prominent figures as Albert Kalonji, Patrice Lumumba, and Cyril Adoula. The CNM had a broad level of support across the entire colony and didn't rely on any single ethnic group for the majority of its support. They favored a gradualist approach to independence. The next most prominent group was the Alliance of Bakongo, or Abako, primarily representing the Bakongo people and led by Joseph Kasavubu. Abako considered the CNM to be too moderate in their approach and advocated for the declaration of immediate independence. The third most significant party was Kanakat, the Confederation of Tribes of Katanga, led by Moise Shambe. Kanakat derived much of its support from the mineral-rich southern province of Katanga. The movement towards independence sharply accelerated after rioting broke out on January 4th, 1959 in the capital of Leopoldville, when a non-sanctioned Abako demonstration turned violent. It took days for the Force Publique, the colonial gendarmerie, to restore order at the cost of dozens, if not hundreds, of lives. The Belgian king, Baudouin, responded on January 13th with an acknowledgement of the need to work towards Congolese independence, but that it would not necessarily be rapid or rash, as he put it. Congo's reaction was one of increasing discontent as demonstrations and riots spread across the colony. The Force Publique, as well as militia groups organized by the white colonists, were heavily involved in suppressing these demonstrations and any Congolese demanding independence. Concerned with the instability in Congo, a roundtable conference was called by the Belgian government in order to meet with the representatives of the major Congolese parties. The meeting was scheduled to start January 20th, 1960, where the Belgians hoped to take advantage of the highly fractured nature of the Congolese and force them to accept a gradualist approach towards independence. But this is not how it played out. The pro-independence groups came together to agree amongst themselves for the same demands of the Belgians. Specifically, they demanded the immediate recognition of an independent Congo and that any decisions made at the Round Table be legally binding. The Belgian reaction was one of rapid capitulation. The anti-colonial stance of both the United States and the Soviet Union meant that no international support would be derived from either superpower. Dipenda, the Congolese term for independence, itself a modification of the French word indépendance, was set for June 30th, 1960. This would follow elections to be held in May. In the run-up to the elections, the fractured political field led to a series of alliances being formed with three main blocs. First was Abaco and a splinter group of the MNC led by Albert Kalonji, the MNC Kalonji. Then there was the centrist MNC Lumumba, and finally was Kanakat and Moise Tshombe, still seeking to maintain their relationship with Union Minière and the riches and power that came with the mining rights in Katanga. The election results placed MNC Lumumba in first place, a result of their broad appeal, while Abaco and Kanakat only managed third and sixth place respectively. A centrist constitution was adopted with a semi-presidential system which would see power shared between the president and the prime minister. There was no plan, however, for the Belgians to withdraw from Congo. The Congolese hoped to take advantage of their skills and knowledge in both technical and administrative fields, while the Belgians hoped to retain their power and influence. June 30th, 1960 saw Belgian Congo become the independent Republic of Congo. But it took almost no time at all for serious problems to present themselves. To start, the commander of the Force Publique, Lieutenant General Emile Janssens, a Belgian, refused to allow wage increases or promotions for the Congolese members of the force. This refusal resulted in the black officers of the Force Publique to mutiny, an action that quickly spread across the new country. The government made an attempt to halt the mutiny, but the violence continued to spread and even broke down along racial lines. Janssens was dismissed by Lumumba and replaced by Victor Lundula, who was promoted from sergeant major to major general. In charge of the Force Publique, which had been renamed Armée Nationale Congolaise, the ANC. The new army chief of staff was former sergeant major Joseph Désiré Mobutu. Remember that name, by the way. Belgium, looking to protect its citizens, the former colonizers who still retained their former positions of power, deployed paratroopers on July 9th, a decision that was never discussed with the new Congolese government. As is so often the case in these situations, the deployment of Belgian troops only escalated the levels of violence between the Belgians and the Congolese. White people in the country were targeted and attacked, triggering a mass exodus from the country, with Belgians fleeing the country as refugees. In the MNC, a split occurred, with Kasavubu being okay with the Belgian troops being deployed, while Lumumba opposed it, calling on all Congolese to defend the new republic against the attackers. So this all seems pretty grim, right? Well, then it got worse. On July 11th, Moise Tshombe of Kanakat declared the independence of the mineral-rich Katanga province, now the state of Katanga. With Elizabethville as his capital, Tshombe became its new president. Katanga was home to several large Belgian mining firms, including the Union Minière de Haute-Katanga, the UMHK, often referred to as simply Union Minière. The secession of Katanga and its mines was supported by Union Minière, who was afraid Lumumba would nationalize the mining industry, and with Union Minière's support came the backing of the Belgian government, unofficially anyway. Tshombe, for his part, claimed the independence of Katanga was necessary to protect the Baluba people, the majority ethnic group in Katanga. The situation was spiraling quickly and was drawing a great deal of international attention, largely focused on the deployment of Belgian troops. The outrage was great enough that by July 14th, the UN Security Council called for a Belgian withdrawal of its troops from Congo to be replaced by a UN force, which would be tasked with restoring order. Both the United States and the Soviet Union voted in favor of the plan, and the Congolese themselves also wanted this to happen. But, and there's the but, the Congolese had the impression that the UN troops would be used to quell the rebellion in Katanga, while the UN mandate looked at that as an internal matter which it would not get involved with. And then things got even worse for the new state. Albert Kalonji, Lumumba's ally within the MNC, declared the independence of South Kasai, another mining-rich province in the south of Congo. That happened on August 9th. It had taken just over a month for the former colony to begin to disintegrate. That this happened so quickly is highly indicative that the colonial stability was ephemeral, only there through the iron will of the Belgian authorities and backed up by force of arms. As Congo was being pulled apart from within, Patrice Lumumba decided to personally seek outside assistance and traveled to the United Nations in New York in July of 1960. While in the US, he hoped to meet with and convince the United States government to provide assistance to the Congolese to put down the rebellion in Katanga. He held extensive meetings with UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld, who encouraged him to be cautious in his actions. Lumumba also met with US officials, where he did secure a promise of assistance, but it would not be direct. Instead, the US would only provide aid and support through the United Nations force, ONUC, whose mandate did not include putting down the rebellion in Katanga. Lumumba even took a side trip to Ottawa to meet with the Canadians to seek their support, but was met with the same reaction. So what made the West so reluctant to support Lumumba? Well, they believed years' worth of Belgian reports that Lumumba was not only anti-white and anti-Western, but that he was also secretly a communist. So, having been rebuffed by the West, but still requiring assistance to restore Congo's territorial integrity, Lumumba made the next logical step. He reached out to the Soviet Union, seeking not only technical assistance and arms, but also the possibility of the deployment of Soviet troops. But he did this without the approval of his political partner in the MNC, Joseph Kasavubu, who began to fear that Lumumba was planning a coup d'etat to take over sole dictatorial power in the new country. The Soviets, for their part, agreed to Lumumba's requests for technical assistance and arms, including aircraft, which were immediately put to use in South Kasai, resulting in a massacre of the majority Baluba people who dominated the region. But Moscow also provided diplomatic support for Lumumba and the Republic of Congo. At the United Nations, they demanded that ONUC troops be put under the control of the Congolese government. As the emerging Congo Crisis broke on the world stage, President Eisenhower criticized Moscow for its unilateral actions. Lawrence Devlin, the CIA chief of station in Leopoldville, described the situation in Congo as a classic communist takeover. By September 5th, Kasavubu, with the support of the Army Chief of Staff, Mobutu, decided to act and began the process of deposing Lumumba by making a radio announcement that he was dismissing both Lumumba as well as 6 key ministers. But Lumumba simply refused to step down, and in a radio broadcast of his own, called on the Congolese parliament, from which he had a great deal of support, to support the deposition of Kasavubu. Declaring that he was in no way a communist, but was only being painted as one for his anti-imperialist position, he ordered Mobutu to arrest Kasavubu. Both men had now ordered Mobutu to arrest the other. So, Mobutu's reaction was to carry out a coup of his own on September 14th. He began to form a technocratic government with himself at the head. This government was to last until the end of 1960, during which the politicians were to sort out their differences. Mobutu moved to arrest Lumumba, but was prevented by ONUC troops, although this did now mean Lumumba was under house arrest by the UN for his own protection. Mobutu ordered the cessation of diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union and any other East Bloc nation, and expelled Soviet personnel from the country. By November 24th, the United Nations had recognized the Mobutu regime as the legitimate government of Congo. Now, Lumumba only remained under house arrest until November 27th, when he left Leopoldville and traveled to Stanleyville, modern-day Kisangani, where he hoped to rally support alongside his ally, Antoine Gizinga. But on December 1st, Lumumba was arrested by agents of the Mobutu regime. As this happened, Gizinga declared that his government represented the Free Republic of the Congo and was the legitimate leadership instead of Mobutu. Gizinga reached out to Moscow asking for Soviet troops to help his cause, but all he received was some material support. Only a few days later, on January 17th, a joint decision by Mobutu, Kasavubu, and Tshombe was made. First, Kasavubu was restored to the office of Prime Minister. Secondly, however, and far more importantly, Patrice Lumumba, who had been transported to Elizabethville, present-day Lumumbashi, was executed by firing squad. While the political situation was beginning to stabilize somewhat in Leopoldville, as 1961 progressed, things were becoming more tense in Katanga between UN forces there and local Katangan troops. In response to the escalating violence, the UN made the decision to act, adopting Resolution 161, allowing for active participation of UN troops to prevent a civil war in Congo, which was interpreted to include military operations in Katanga. While the UN continued to try a negotiated settlement over the course of 1961, ONUC troops were engaged in trying to maintain some sort of peace, including the arrest of foreign mercenaries being employed in Katanga. September of 1961 also saw a company of Irish UN troops captured and held hostage after being attacked at the town of Jadoteville. This is the subject of the book and later movie, Siege of Jadoteville, well worth checking out if you haven't already. Also, in September of 1961, while engaged in shuttle diplomacy between the various factions, the plane carrying the UN General Secretary, Dag Hammarskjöld, crashed, killing all aboard. The crash has spawned a great many theories, including pilot error, engine failure, sabotage by Union Minière, being shot down by the KGB, or shot down by a mercenary pilot flying for the Katangan rebels. None of these theories have ever been conclusively proven. Uthant was selected as Hammarskjöld's replacement as Secretary General, and he took a much more stringent and direct approach towards resolving the crisis in Congo. By April 1962, as a result of a series of operations conducted by ONUC forces, the rebellion in South Kasai had been put down, and by early 1963, the same had been accomplished in Katanga. Meanwhile, the claimed government that Gizinga as Lumumba's successor had declared in Stanleyville was also defeated, despite support it was receiving from both the Soviet Union, the United Arab Republic, and the PRC. And so stability, peace, and prosperity was brought to the Congo. Actually, no, not at all. Although the fighting had stopped, mostly, the process of reconciliation still had to be accomplished. A new constitution was adopted in 1964, making the office of president more powerful than the prime minister, and also devolving more power to the regions. This increased federalism was designed to decrease the risk of ethnically based separatism. President Kasavubu, interestingly, appointed Moise Tshombe as the prime minister, but even these steps failed to bring the desired stability to Congo. Between 1963 and 1965, two further major rebellions took place: the Kuilu Rebellion in the Kuilu region, led by Lumumbists and Maoists, and then the Simba Rebellion, again conducted by Lumumbist forces, but included Inyezi rebels from neighboring Rwanda, as well as Ugandan support. Both the Simba Rebellions and Kuilu Rebellion received some basic support from the socialist world, while Kasavubu was being backed by the West. Ultimately, a lack of discipline and vision for the entire country led to not only infighting amongst the rebels, but a lack of general support across the Congo, and the rebellions collapsed in the face of government military offensives, supported by both the United States and Belgian paratroopers. The defeated rebels then shifted to conducting a low-level guerrilla insurgency instead of direct rebellion, something that would continue to plague Congo into the present day. General elections were held in 1965 and were won by Moise Tshombe's Congolese National Convention, who expected to become the prime minister. President Kasavubu, however, instead appointed Évariste Kimba of the Congolese Democratic Front as prime minister. The ensuing deadlock dragged on for months as Parliament refused to confirm Kimba as PM. Government and governance was paralyzed as a result. On the 24th of November, the 35-year-old Chief of Staff of the Armed Forces Joseph Désiré Mobutu conducted a bloodless coup and declared a state of emergency. He dissolved parliament, banned political parties, and declared that democracy would be restored in 5 years. Mobutu's second coup ended the Congo Crisis, but in no way ended the suffering of the people of the Congo. Mobutu would go on to establish himself as the permanent one-man ruler of the country, using his position to amass a vast personal fortune at the expense of the Congolese people. The massive bloodletting involved in the Congo Crisis, upwards of 100,000 casualties, quickly made the Congo a symbol of the complexity and difficulties inherent in much of the African decolonization process. The speed with which the independence movement gained success meant that there was no opportunity for the inexperienced elites to learn how to find consensus without resorting to force of arms. They were also subject to the manipulation by outside powers who looked to gain influence over the resource-rich new country. The ethnic strife that came with the Congo forged deep, long-lasting animosities that also spilled across international borders, including into places like Rwanda and Angola. Congo was even used by other nations in Africa as the example of what not to do, as new countries worked to prevent regions from declaring independence, like had happened in Katanga. And finally, the Congo Crisis was a high watermark for the United Nations. With the formation and deployment of ONUC, it was the first UN mission to explicitly permit the use of force to uphold its mandate, and was the first mission to enforce both a no-fly zone and an arms embargo, as it went on to bring unenforced stability to the country. Congo, renamed Zaire in 1972, was staunchly anti-Soviet under Mobutu and enjoyed a warm relationship with the United States, who was most interested in securing access to the uranium mines in Congo, required for the US nuclear arsenal. Interestingly, Mobutu also fostered a relationship with the PRC, looking to prevent Soviet interests in Central Africa. But all of these are possible topics for future episodes. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss our future work, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and have deployed troops to the disputed zone around the bell button to make sure it remains safe and pressable. Please consider supporting us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/thecoldwar or through YouTube membership. We can be reached via email at thecoldwarchannel@gmail.com. This is the Cold War Channel, and as we think about the Cold War, I will leave you with the words of JFK. In the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air, we all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal.